Hello, my name is Alyssa, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the misconceptions about gender-based differences in emotion. Specifically, I want to expel some misconceptions centered around the stereotype that women are the more emotional gender. Women feel more emotions than men. Women are more emotionally expressive than men. Women are just biologically wired to be more emotional and emotionally intelligent than men. I'm sure you've heard at least some variation of this sentiment in your day-to-day lives. This skewed perception of women's emotional life can have serious consequences for how women have to navigate the world, especially in their careers. A 2008 study conducted by Breskel and Ullman titled Can Angry Women Get Ahead? Status Conferral, Gender, and Expression of Emotion in the Workplace found that while men were generally rewarded for their expressions of anger in a professional context, being given higher status, women were punished for it. When women expressed anger in a professional context, they received lower wages, lower status, and were seen as less competent than their angry male counterparts. When men express anger, they are seen as assertive, and their emotions are often given an external attribution. His situation obviously made him angry. When women express anger, they are seen as out of control, and their emotions are often given an internal attribution. She is obviously just an angry woman. This sentiment has serious consequences not just for how society views and treats women, but for how women view themselves. A 1998 study conducted by Barrett et al., titled Are Women the More Emotional Sex? Evidence from Emotional Experiences in Social Context, found that there were gender differences in how men and women rated their emotional experiences retrospectively when they were asked to remember and generalize how they would react to different emotional situations. When retrospectively rating their emotional experiences, women rated themselves as being more emotional in comparison to how men rated themselves. However, when Barrett et al. Obtained experience sampling data in which both men and women checked in multiple times throughout the day to report their current emotional experience on a moment-to-moment basis, the gender difference disappeared. Women rated themselves as being more emotional when asked to reflect and generalize, but there were no actual significant differences in the emotional experience across men and women in real life on a moment-to-moment basis. This shows us how gender stereotypes about emotion can skew women's own perceptions of themselves and their emotionality, despite the lack of an actual gender difference in emotional experience. So, women aren't actually experiencing more emotions or feeling more emotional than men, but don't they look different? Maybe even if they aren't feeling any different than men, they are more emotionally expressive than men, and that's why people think they are more emotional. A 1998 study by Kring and Gordon titled Sex Differences in Emotion, Expression, Experience, and Physiology explored this question. They showed participants a series of emotion-inducing videos thought to induce happiness, sadness, and fear, respectively, and used the facial expression coding system, FACES, to assess dimensions of facial expression, not mapping facial configurations to specific emotion labels. Using this rating system, coders assessed any change in the face from a neutral display and measured it in regards to its valence, positive or negative, intensity, low to high on a 4-point scale, and duration, how long the expression lasted. They found that there were significant gender differences in emotional expression for the happy, sad, and fear conditions, with women's faces being more expressive, having a higher frequency of facial movement than men. Kring and Gordon also measured the frequency of actual emotion experience during these conditions, and found no significant gender differences for any of the emotion conditions. This supports the claim that, although women are not more emotional than men, they are more emotionally expressive than men. However, there are important aspects of this study design to consider. The ratings were measured by people, and these raters were not blinded to the gender of the participant they were measuring, so it is possible for their implicit gender biases regarding emotion to have skewed their perceptions of women and men's emotional expressiveness. Results from another study conducted in 2006 by Kelly et al. Reveal that there may not actually be gender differences in emotional expressiveness of women compared to men. The 2006 study conducted by Kelly et al., titled Sex Differences in Response to Panicogenic Challenge Procedure, an Experimental Evaluation of Panic Vulnerability in Non-Clinical Sample, used EMG recordings of facial muscle movement to measure expressive responses to the experience of fear or panic in comparison to baseline. To induce panic, they had the participants inhale 20% carbon dioxide, which triggers the experience of panic due to it being more difficult to breathe. What they found was that there was no gender difference in the change of the frontalis facial muscle response from baseline to during panic, but there were significant gender differences in the frontalis facial muscle movement at baseline. What this indicates to us is that women may not be more emotionally expressive, they just move their face more at baseline. So putting all of this together, if women aren't more emotional or more emotionally expressive than men, why is it that they typically outperform men when it comes to measures of emotional intelligence and emotional awareness? Is it something about their biology? Some may think that women just have a better interoceptive ability, the ability to feel what's going on in their own body, so they must just be more in tune with their emotional side than men. To break this down, we first need to break down what is an emotion, really, from a constructivist perspective. First off, Our emotions are based on our core affect, measured by valence and arousal, and then we apply our own conceptualization of our core affect using our language and past experiences to construct our experience of emotion. Keeping this in mind, sensing our core affect comes from both our interoceptive and exteroceptive abilities. Exteroceptive abilities being how we can perceive the outside world, sight, smell, taste, touch, etc., and interoceptive abilities being how we can perceive the internal state of our own body, heart rate, hunger, breathing rate, body temperature, etc. Because generally, women outperform men in measures of emotional recognition and emotional processing, intuitively, many people thought that women had stronger interoceptive abilities than men, and therefore were able to better sense their internal state and core affect as they received stronger or more detailed cues about their own internal state as they constructed their emotions. However, this was not the case, and there are many different theories as to why. A 2022 review paper by Prentice et al. Titled Gender Differences in Interoceptive Accuracy and Emotional Ability, An Explanation for Incompatible Findings, explored this topic. What they found is that despite the research findings that women perform better than men in measures of emotional processing and recognition, women actually have poorer interoceptive accuracy than men. These measures include a wide range of interoceptive abilities, such as blood glucose levels, blood pressure, and cardiac and respiratory rates. In this paper, Prentice et al. Sought out potential explanations for these seemingly counterintuitive findings. They suggest that theories of emotion that heavily rely on interoceptive ability as it correlates to emotional abilities may only apply to men. To support their claim, they cite that recent research has shown that while there is a positive correlation between interoceptive accuracy and emotional regulation strategies in men, there is no correlation between these two measures for women. This paper asserts that men may rely more on physiological cues, whereas women may rely more on situational cues in assessing their core affect, and thus constructing their emotional state, as well as in assessing emotional displays of others. In exploring the reasons behind this disconnect, they propose two different potential explanations, biological and social. First, let's explore the biological explanation. One theory is that the physical and hormonal changes that women experience throughout their development creates a larger prediction error between the actual and expected states of their body. This is supported by research findings that, before puberty, there are no gender differences in interoceptive accuracy, but after puberty, there are. Another explanation that this paper proposes is that the gender difference in interoceptive accuracy could be due to social factors, such as how we talk about topics such as menstruation. Like how we discussed how stereotypes skewed women's perceptions of themselves as being more emotional than they actually are, the way that society often talks about menstruation in women's bodies as an unpredictable hormonal mystery or roller coaster can make women mistrust their perception of their own body's internal signals, causing them to rely more on situational cues rather than internal cues for sensing their own affective and emotional states. There's no definitive answer as to why women generally have poorer interoceptive abilities in comparison to men, but as with most scientific explanations, it's likely a nuanced blend of both nature and nurture. The key takeaway from this review, as it relates to the overarching topic of this video about misconceptions and gender-based differences in emotion, is that while women and men do not have significant differences in the overall experience and expression of their emotions, there are clear gender differences in how society treats their emotions, as well as in how they experience and interpret their core affect. To close out this video, I just want to acknowledge that gender is a spectrum, and our experience and expressions of emotion are unique and highly individualized phenomena that are built upon a complex web of biological sensing and our own conceptualization, language, experience, and the culture that surrounds us. Understanding emotion through the lens of gender is just one angle for us to explore the underlying mechanisms of emotion and individual differences, but the study of emotion contains a rich array of other demographics to explore as well. I'm excited to see how future research further explores the relationships between gender and emotion. Thank you so much for watching!